Is that okay? Yep.
We almost ready? Good morning, everyone, on what is yet another beautiful Melbourne morning. Today we are joined by Bruce Wolpe, a senior fellow at the United States Studies Center. Bruce is a regular contributor on U.S. politics, as so many of you are already aware, across media platforms and throughout Australia. In recent years, Bruce has worked with the Democrats in Congress during President Barack Obama's first term, as well as on the staff of Prime Minister Julia Gillard. He has also served as the former Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. What occasioned this exciting gathering this morning was the recent publication of Bruce's book, Trump's Australia. I hope that many of you have already acquired it and begun to read.
We should hold it up so that everyone, this is the shameless advertising that we have. There you go. It's available on Amazon, and you can have it delivered tomorrow.
Fantastic. This book, and as we'll see, examines the prospects for Donald Trump's possible return to the White House, as well as the implications of his first administration. To begin this morning, I would like to invite Kevin forward to recite an acknowledgement for country. And then I'll ask everyone to please stand for a prayer for Israel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. We acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of Australia. The Bunurong and Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation are the traditional owners of the land where Temple Beth Israel is located. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
Thank you, Kevin. Elohei Avraham v'Sarah, shield of Abraham and the help of Sarah. At this hour of trial and uncertainty, we offer our prayer for the state and citizens of Israel, for the soldiers and civilians taken captive far from their loved ones. We pray, give them strength, show them mercy, provide them hope, and send them home. For each injured soul, whether of body or spirit, bring a complete and speedy healing. Grant to those who attend them skill and compassion. Shomer Yisrael, guardian of Israel, may peace descend upon the land of Israel, south, north, east, and west. Grant to its government the wisdom and discernment to ensure justice and security for all Israel's inhabitants, together with all those men, women, and children caught in the web of terror and tragedy. Protect and watch over the brave fighters of the Israeli Defense Forces, bolster their courage, keep them safe, hear their prayers, and bring them victory. El Harachaman, God of compassion, uphold and comfort those who mourn. Help them in time to transcend their grief, to live beside the pain none should endure. Above all, remember for merit and for good all our martyred dead, the souls of each innocent victim whose life has been cut short. May they find eternal peace and their memory be a blessing. Help us to honor their memory through our prayers and our deeds, now and always. Amen. Please be seated, and thank you once more for coming along today. When my friend Tom Firestone came in earlier today, he said, "Is there going to be heating on?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I think it'll get nice and toasty in here." But now I'm chalishing, it's so hot. Okay. Good morning, Bruce.
Gary, it's just wonderful to be here with you.
It's nice to come to Melbourne.
It's great to come to Melbourne. I get a visa and everything. It's wonderful.
That's it. Fantastic. I was so excited when last in the airport, when I found your book staring back at me. And I said, I've known Bruce for such a long time. I know that he is incisive and he's a fine thinker and so absorbed with matters politic,
This only lasts until Yom Kippur, and then
both
everything
in America and here in Australia. But I'm curious, and I know our group will want to know, what motivated you to write your book?
Thanks so much. The publisher, Allen & Unwin, came to me. I had no intention of writing a book. I've had two previous books. One when I was a lobbyist in Washington, worked for a great public relations firm, government relations firm started by two women, Ann Wexler, who worked with Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton, and Nancy Reynolds, who worked with Ronald Reagan. So this was the first firm in Washington headed by women and was bipartisan. So they were just exceptional and extraordinary. So I worked with them, and after working as a staffer in Congress for 10 years, I went into the persuasion business, and I wanted to write a book about what makes a good lobbyist. So that was one book called Lobbying Congress. It doesn't apply anymore because now if you just give money, everything is just fine. So there's nothing about, and the system is not what it was 30, 40 years ago. And the second book was when I went back to Washington when when Obama was elected. I wanted to be part of that, and I returned to the member of Congress who I started with and ultimately worked 10 years for, Henry Waxman, a Democrat of Los Angeles, who was one of the great legislators of the post-World War II era. He was responsible in large part for Obamacare, for AIDS, HIV, for the Clean Air Act, fighting global warming, acid rain, all sorts of things. A wonderful, wonderful man. So when I went back to work with Henry, I knew his committee. He became chairman of the committee that would have carriage of Obama's most important legislation. And I kept a diary every day of what we did because I knew it would be historical. So that book is called The Committee, and I named it that way because I was hoping it would be an HBO special, The Committee. And we get it on TV. So I had no intention of writing another book, but Allen & Unwin came to me, a great guy, Malcolm Knox, who you may read in The Age from time to time. And he said, we like your writing on politics. And I've been writing on US politics here since I came in the early 90s. Because what I try to do is, everyone knows my pedigree. I'm a liberal Democrat, California oriented, and so everyone knows where I am politically. But what I really like doing here in Australia, where I'm a citizen here as well, they let me vote here, is I really want to explain why you're seeing what you're seeing on television screens. And if I can do that so that you have a better understanding of what's occurring and why, then I feel I've done a good job. So they said, we like your writing, and we'd like you to write a book on Australian politics. And I say, I don't write on Australian politics, I write on American politics. And I just, even after 30 years, I'm not comfortable really getting into making really public judgments about what happens here politically. But where we landed was, because Trump was still in orbit, was a book on, well, if Trump does come back, and we had the experience of the first term, what's he going to do? How's that going to affect Australia? How's it going to affect public policy, the political culture? What does Australia need to do to prepare itself in case Trump does come back? And then turning to, what does it mean for Australia's democracy, since Trump is such an anti-democratic force? And then it turns to, well, what happens if in fact Trump does come back and destroys America's democracy? What does that mean for Australia's future? So it has three parts: issues, what happens on trade, what happens on economic policy, the environment, foreign policy in particular, Asia Pacific, China, things that President Biden and President Xi are talking about right now at this very moment in California. And then how does this affect Australia's political culture? And then what happens in the future? So that's where the book came from. I really enjoyed writing it, and I turned it in early. I made every other author, Allen & Unwin, very jealous and angry at me for doing that. And the book has been, well, we can discuss how the book has been received, but thank you.
Thank you very much. You begin your book in chapter 1 with an extended citation.
It begins in the beginning, God, right?
That's another book. You begin with an excerpt from Donald Trump's 45th inaugural address in Washington in 2017 at the beginning of the year. In it, he articulates a new vision for America's position in the world. He called it America First, America Last, America Always. How does this position play out during the course of his administration? And is it still likely to be the case in the event that he were to return to power, that America would grow increasingly isolated in its interests? Yeah. And what does that mean for our region?
America First is actually not a new term. It's an old term. It comes in the 20th century. It was a Lindbergh term. It was the term used by isolationists who did not want America to get into World War II and fight the Germans. And the Germans first, and then the Japanese, of course, after Pearl Harbor. So there are episodes of isolationism in American history. And Trump caught the wave of the current one that he is championing. The last Republican presidential candidate to resuscitate America First and use it to some degree was Pat Buchanan in the early 1990s, running against George H.W. Bush. And this is after the first Iraq War, the liberation of Kuwait, American foreign policy, and the collapse of the Soviet Union. American foreign policy was at its zenith. But here was Pat Buchanan saying, well, it's time to turn inwards and do things for the American people at home and not have all these international entanglements. What makes Trump so exceptional is not his belief in America First or the other things that he believes in, but that he is so effective in championing those values. And he's unique because I can't think of anybody else who has such a compelling presence in media and in the attention span of the American people or the world than him. I mean, he takes the oxygen out of any room that he's in. Whenever he's on television, it's sort of like watching a car crash sometimes. You want to see the gore. When he's on television, people, the viewership goes up and everything like that. People are fascinated, repelled at the same time. For him, America First means that first and foremost, everything that the United States does, especially outside, in foreign policy, has to benefit the United States. So that means that all trade agreements have to benefit the United States. All security agreements have to benefit the United States. The costs have to be low, the rewards have to be high, and we don't make deals with people that will harm the interests of the United States or compromise our position in the world.
When explained like that, it seems entirely innocuous. What, if anything, is sinister about the America First position?
We saw a lot of sinister stuff in his first term. It's how he approaches, there was an architecture set up after World War II to govern the world, so starting with the United Nations. We have feelings about the United Nations, of course, but on the whole, I think absolutely more good than harm from having a body where you can come together, discuss, hopefully resolve things. There are a web of international trade agreements. There are organizations like the World Health Organization. There are NATO, of course. In the Pacific, there are alliances that the United States has with Japan, with South Korea, with Australia, of course, and that's growing with AUKUS, and we can get into that. So, but what Trump did clearly in the first term was attack NATO. He wanted to withdraw the United States from NATO. Look how he treated Angela Merkel in Germany. Look how he treated Theresa May as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And in Japan, he loved that the Prime Minister of Japan wanted to come and play golf with him so often. And that relationship was actually pretty good, but Trump was not happy that the cost of American bases in Japan, what they had to pay to do it, was high. And with South Korea, he loved the leader of North Korea much more than the president of South Korea. And he was within an hour of signing a piece of paper on his desk which would have unilaterally withdrawn American troops from South Korea. I think it was the chief of staff or one of his deputies spotted this piece of paper on his desk and took it away, and he didn't sign it that day, and I think he probably forgot about it. But
it's interesting you should say that.
Yeah.
Only yesterday it was reported that those around Trump are working towards an agenda that would surround him with loyalists and unencumber him from the normative governmental officials who take care that something like that doesn't happen.
He he is a very cunning and canny man. He is not stupid. He knows the survival of the Trump more than anybody else. And he is a fighter. He never recants. He never retreats. He never admits. He never goes backwards. It's always forward. When he's attacked, he attacks back. And he doesn't know, he has no other gear. He doesn't have a reverse gear. What he learned several things from the first term, but the principal one that links all these issues is, I'm going to accomplish in the next term what I didn't accomplish in the first term. And the key to doing that is to make sure I have people around me who will do everything that I say and will not question what I do. And he knows the process much better now. Again, he's not stupid. He did it for 4 years. He knows the process and what buttons to push and how to make things work. It's in his head. And so he will never have a chief of staff like John Kelly who will say, no, Mr. President, you can't do that. He will never have a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who says, I'm sorry, I'm not going to send American troops into American cities to put down people demonstrating against the murder of George Floyd. He will not have an attorney general who said, you lost the election, I'm not going to court, I'm not going to overturn it. And he will most certainly never have a vice president who refuses to follow his order to overturn the election in the United States Senate.
Quite right.
And that is the key to him being able to prosecute everything that he wants to do and with much more effect. So as scary as the first term was, the second term is scarier because he knows this stuff better and there's a better chance. He's going to come in with a running head start, which you referred to. The New York Times in particular has been reporting a lot of these plans of what he's going to do with the bureaucracy. Bureaucrats will have to sign a loyalty oath. If they don't sign the oath, they're out. He's going to make sure all of his appointments are completely loyal. We'll watch and see who he chooses as his vice presidential candidate, assuming he is the nominee, and I can assure you it's not going to be anyone like Mike Pence. It's certainly not going to be Nikki Haley. It's going to be someone like Kari Lake, the woman in Arizona, or Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota. And actually, if you think about his age and the size of his waist, getting to the presidency is probably a hot ticket to get to the presidency if you're his vice president, right? Sorry, I'm sorry for scaring the horses. I really am.
You remind me of that public official who remarked some years ago that his oath wasn't to Donald Trump. His oath of loyalty was to the U.S. Constitution.
That's right. There's what's so interesting, well, and we can be heartened by it, but true conservatives are very upset with Trump, and there's a judge, Michael Luttig, in Washington, who's one of the most distinguished conservative jurists. It's amazing how much regard I have for conservatives these days that I didn't have 10 years ago, who is a strict constructionist, but a man of the highest legal order. And you may have heard of him, Kevin, Michael Luttig. And he just said, you take an oath to the Constitution. You don't take an oath to the American people or anything like that. And the Constitution is supreme. I thought Trump, A, he's never read the Constitution. He admits that. And B, it doesn't matter what people tell him the Constitution says. He says, I'm going to do it my way.
You know, we meet today in this beautiful, beautiful Beit Knesset. And I'm reminded that in the Jewish tradition, it says the world rests upon emet, emet being truth. And so I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what has the introduction into the political bloodstream of, in the first instance, alternate facts, and subsequently conspiracy theories, and an enormous number of shameless lies, what has it done to the American electorate, to the country, and what impact, if any, may these trends have on our country?
It corrodes the political culture, because when someone who is the President of the United States can say so many things that are just A, flatly wrong, B, horrible, C, repugnant, and get away with it and be rewarded for doing it, then you have a shift in what's going on. But the larger question, it really gets to a larger question of truth. And that is that Trump, He's known for telling over 30,000 lies during the course of his presidency. People fact check him every day, and it goes in the Washington Post. But I write, notwithstanding the fact that he has told 30,000 lies to the American people in the course of his presidency, he's the most relentlessly honest politician I've seen in my lifetime. And by that I mean, when he says he's going to do something, he does it. So America first? Yeah, I'm going to retreat from the world. I'm a nativist, I'm against immigration, I'm going to build the wall. I'm a protectionist, no trade deal is going to harm the United States, he has a trade war. And so he prosecutes his agenda with abandon. And his base, again, these waves of populism that come from time to time, it has a following. I think he has between 40 and 45% rock solid support among Republican voters. You know, we like to say here in Australia, someone's rusted onto somebody. They're welded onto him. It doesn't matter that he tells lies. They don't care about that. What they care about is what he does. In his personal life, he's a mess, right? I mean, the marriages and all kinds of nonsense and stuff that goes on. But what's terribly important to evangelical Christians, it's not his morality. I mean, Mike Pence is one of the most moral men that you can find, but they support Donald Trump because he delivers on abortion and having the court strike down abortion rights. And so it's what he does, not what he says, that is so important. And that is one of the keys to his effectiveness and his success. And we haven't seen anything quite like it. Any other candidate who would say things like John McCain, the great senator from Arizona, who was a war hero, imprisoned in Hanoi for, 5 years? Shot down, his father was an admiral. The North Vietnamese told McCain, we'll let you out. You know, you're the son of an admiral. You can go now. And he says, I'm not going until this is over and you free everybody else in this prison. So what does Trump say as he's campaigning in 2016? He says, I don't have any respect for John McCain. He's not a hero. He got captured. And anyone else who would say that would be driven from the race. In 2016, he attacked the Pope. He attacked the Pope, and he wins much of the Catholic vote. I mean, give me a break. How does this happen?
So if he were sitting in a parlor room with 3 or 4 people saying this, it wouldn't have the same effect as it appears to have because of what I call the foxification of the media environment. There are so many now media organs that disseminate this dangerous nonsense.
Yes.
It's changed the political culture. What you write about in your book, unless I'm mistaken, is the threat to our society of a further foxification. You talk about Rupert Murdoch, et cetera. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, but I'm not as afraid of the foxification of culture here as exists there. And when Trump falls out of favor with Fox, other people start up other right-wing news outlets, and the audience, again, the welded-on audience finds it, and it goes forward. Here, I just think there's been a flattening of media power by the internet, streaming services, and other stuff like that, and that people, well, here in Victoria, I mean, the Murdoch empire was very much against Dan Andrews, but he won the last election. On culture war issues, the liberals have been losing over the past couple of years pretty significantly on trans issues and other things. And so I just think the bark is worse than the bite. I think there's some other factors involved, including who votes, and we can get to guardrails of Australia's democracy, and I think the guardrails are very sound and very needed and something to be very proud of. But what you have is a corrosion of the political culture in America because things are said and can be debated, and they affect thinking and where the center is. Those things leach into here, and they come out in very powerful ways. So fake news is now the first argument of retreat by any political figure who's asked a hostile question. Well, that's just fake news, which means I don't want to answer your question. I'm not going to answer your question. In more profound terms, where everyone's worried about Nazis these days. And so you have Nazis in Charlottesville, Virginia, in a riot, and people die, and it's why Joe Biden got into the presidential race. Well, 3 years ago, there were Nazis marching in front of the parliament here in Melbourne. You had gallows being on a cart outside of the Capitol on January 6th. Well, last time I checked, there were gallows on the streets of Melbourne during the pandemic about health experts and what they're going to do, and this is death. So these things come across. They're in the political culture. So then the question is the political culture here strong enough to withstand it? And I believe emphatically yes.
Let's hope so. There's so many things I'd like to address with you.
Yeah, we're going to be in session for another 2 days. So get ready.
All right, let's talk about polls.
Okay.
Political polls, 1 year out from the general election in November of 2024.
Yes.
I want to ask you, how do you regard these early polls that seem to suggest that Trump is preferred over President Biden in a two-person race? And what are we to make of the recent news that there are third-party candidates that might skew the result, penalize the Democrats, and give Trump a path to the presidency?
Yes, well, I remember President John Kerry and President Hillary Clinton very favorably a year out before the election. I remember President Romney. He was a great president, President Romney. So the polls a year out don't really tell you much. But what they do tell us is that Biden's popularity is low. It's in the high 30s or 40%. That is not a winning position. I think it's his approval, disapproval crossed at Afghanistan. That withdrawal was terribly executed. And look where Afghanistan is today and where our interests are today and so forth. And that is, that stuck in the minds. That was a cut-through moment, and people said, well, you're the foreign policy president, you have this mess. And then immediately after that, inflation hit, just like it hits here, and it hurts. And so the two things I think kind of drive where we are, the president's approval rating, and then the question that pollsters like to ask Americans, is the country on the right track or in the wrong direction? And 75% say it's on the wrong track, wrong direction. And it's hard to vote to reelect somebody if you're really unhappy about the future of the country.
There was a comment made earlier this week, which I can't remember where I heard it or exactly what it was, but when people are asked in a poll, they say such and such. When they stand before the voting booth, they do such and such.
Right, and that's what Joe Biden really hopes happens. I think he always says, don't compare me to the Almighty, compare me to my opponent. So let's go back to Charlottesville for a moment. That's why Biden entered the race. And what the Democrats wanted to do in 2020 was find the person who could beat Trump. Defeating Trump was the highest priority. And I was in Colorado at the time, and the Colorado primary the Democratic primary was on, and I was really thinking, who is the best to beat Trump? And I was thinking about Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York. I was just looking who could do it. And ultimately, I decided that Biden was the best one to do it, and I voted for Biden. And so that's what, his 2020 win was transactional. Who can beat Trump? He delivered on the transaction. He defeated him. It was not emotional. Trump's vote is emotional, and that is carrying through to 2024. That's why he's a very potent candidate.
I'm watching several things. I'm watching the economic performance.
Yep.
They're not getting younger, either one of them.
No.
But it seems like an inordinate amount of attention is paid to Joe Biden's age as opposed to Donald Trump's age. I'm watching gas prices,
Yep.
the incumbent's performance, and more especially now, the American position both in the Ukraine as well as in Gaza.
Yes. Foreign policy doesn't win elections. Foreign policy loses elections. Again, George H.W. Bush, the great liberator of Kuwait, one of the most successful American battles in history, he was at 90% approval 18 months before the election and lost the election to Bill Clinton. So Jimmy Carter, the Iran hostage crisis, some of you may remember, that cost him the presidency along with high inflation. And so it's not, even if Ukraine defeats Russia this winter, there are some promising signs after a long period of gridlock right now. And Israel prevails without further massive loss of life, that would be seen as a successful management. On the other hand, If the war truly explodes, then Iran comes into the war, and the United States is at war with Iran over the next few months, I think that is very fraught political territory, because who the hell wants to get into a war right now?
I thought the war in Gaza, to be crude, appeared to be working in the president's favor. He was on the right side of the moral.
He remains on the right side of the moral issue.
He does, however, the world interprets him as being on the wrong side.
He's on the wrong side of the PR issue.
Yeah.
And that's just, when people see civilians being killed in massive numbers, there is a reaction. Australians, I think, almost always go with the underdog. There's something in the Australian spirit to be with the underdog. The Palestinians are seen as the underdogs. So I mean, this is just raw political talk. I'm not making any statements beyond that.
I want to turn our attention for a moment to our politics here in Australia, so far as they concern the war in Gaza, and to ask you to discuss our government's position, that is the federal government, and what considerations they need to weigh in forming that policy.
Well, I'm not going to get into the federal government. That debate is ongoing, and people make their judgments, and I know where the community stands and so forth, and I think it's been clearly expressed. I thought the Prime Minister gave a very passionate speech in Parliament yesterday, denouncing the attempts, which actually flow. I think there's a connection between the failure of the voice and what we're hearing on this issue. Racial divisiveness is at a higher level than it was since before the voice, and I think the two are connected. It's now more legitimate to get out there in ugly ways, and I think that's very, very unfortunate. But in thinking about the war, we talked, I think, as things were getting underway. It was terrible, but I made some notes to myself as to what's kind of driving, what are objectives? And on the war, first, destroy Hamas. It should not exist. Second, rescue the hostages. Third, separate the Palestinians from Hamas, the Palestinian people from Hamas. I think they are distinct. And fourth, avoid a regional war. The first two are being fought out right now. The issue of separating the Palestinian people from Hamas, I'm not at all sure, given everything that has occurred in Gaza, whether that is possible. And it makes me worry that the next generation of Israel killers is being born in Gaza right now. And that's where are they going to be when this thing ends? I don't know, but I worry about that. And as far as regional war, thank goodness there is no regional war yet, but it's tense it's sort of like Ukraine. How far can the Ukrainians press Russia before Putin says, I want to use a tactical nuclear weapon, get the hell out of Ukraine? So these things are unresolved, but that's what I was thinking about.
I have a couple of additional questions, but I thought now might be an opportune time to open it up for your questions. If you have a question, please just raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone.
Can I say one more thing?
Of course.
Just going back to the age issue and so forth. How does the age issue play out? Because you asked about Trump too. Trump presents more energetically because he just has a stronger presence. Biden looks old, walks old, talks old, but I think Biden's mind is, crystal clear, and he knows exactly what he's doing. But I think that's one Trump advantage. Sir.
Just give your name.
Yeah, David Bruce. My question is, you said that the Trump faction has learned a lot since the first time in. What has the Democratic Party learned as well? What is their reaction to that? And it really speaks, I think, to the moving on of political culture on the left, the right and the centre in the States.
The Democrats believe that that they actually reflect mainstream thinking, that Trump is extreme and they reflect the mainstream. And there are two things, two ways to look at this. One is election results since 2016. So the Democrats storm back and take the House in 2018. In 2020, Trump is defeated. In 2022, the Republican wave, they take the House, but by like 4 votes. But they didn't take back the Senate, which everyone expected. In other words, Trump is a 3-time loser. And what does a political party want to do? They want to win. So the question is, can they turn the page on Trump? I think a lot of people want to turn the page on Trump, but a lot of people are afraid to turn the page on Trump at the same time. And we can talk about that. And then the second thing is so where's this driven from? It's issues. So look at Trump brags, I put the judges on the Supreme Court that repealed Roe v. Wade, and there aren't national abortion rights under the Constitution anymore. That's offensive in a big way. I mean, since the Civil War, the arc of history has been an expansion of rights. Civil rights, gay rights, abortion rights. This is the first time, when a kid has a lollipop and you take it away from the kid, what does the kid do? They scream. And when you take away abortion rights, women and their families are screaming. There are conversations across America every summer now. Oh, you're applying to college in this state or that state. Well, what are the abortion laws in that state? That is a very powerful conversation. So even in the most, sorry, I thought Trump has taken my microphone away. So.
It's coming.
Yeah, okay, 1 second. Let me do this. Here we go. So in even the most conservative states, Kentucky and Ohio and Kansas, the rock-solid Republican states, they voted for abortion rights. And that doesn't mean they're voting Democratic, but it really shows the power of the issues. But Democrats own that issue now, and it's working for them.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Brian to ask his question. You know, I'm thinking of a sports analogy, as I often do.
So.
It appears to me that Trump has a high floor and a low ceiling.
Okay.
Right? So he may have a rock-solid 40 whatever % of his following.
Yes. He never cracked 50% approval.
Exactly.
Thank you, Bruce. Where we sit here in Australia, we've seen the demise of America over the last, demise of America over the last 10 years with the rise of China. It amazes most of us here that America can't find two candidates of reasonable intelligence, of reasonable age, that can try and take America back to being Ford again.
Let me talk about Trump first with regard to that. Why is it so hard to get past Trump? He has this base of 40, welded onto him. And what he says, and I just want to read a couple things that he says in his campaign speeches. I mean, he's sort of like Fidel Castro. He gets up there for like 90 minutes and starts ranting for a long time. That's why he likes Florida. No, the mic isn't. Okay.
That's it, right there. That should be.
Is that okay? No.
Just speak a little louder, Bruce. It's fine.
I'm going to hold it. How's that? Okay. Gosh, a handheld mic. Who knew? So this is what he says in his campaign rallies. He says, in the end, they're not coming after me. They're coming after you.
Right.
Either we have a deep state or we have a democracy. Either the deep state destroys America or we destroy the deep state. I'm being indicted for you. That's not part of the job description, but I'm being indicted for you. They're destroying our country, and if we don't take it back, I really believe we're not going to have a country left. And then he says, he says, this is the final battle. It's almost biblical in its invocation. This is the final battle. And this is really, it's extremely powerful and effective stuff. And then he has, and then in recent speeches, okay, so he says that, when they're coming after me, they're coming after you. So if I'm Nikki Haley and I'm attacking Donald Trump, I'm not attacking just Donald Trump, I'm attacking his voters. So how can we expect Trump's voters to vote for Nikki Haley? That's why she's not going to get the nomination. And that's the secret to his success and why the Republican Party is stuck with Trump. Now, if that's as far as the base is concerned. As far as the leadership is concerned, if you took the Republican leaders in Congress and locked them in a room and turned off the lights and had them vote, do you want Trump on the ballot? I'd say it'd be 70% no, 30% yes. But when you get in public, they don't say that, because if they come out against Trump, look at all the Republicans in the House who voted to impeach him or served on the committee to investigate him. He gets them pre-selected. He has a pre-selection against him, and they're defeated. A guy who was going to be Speaker of the House said that the 2020 election was not stolen. He's not Speaker. A guy who denied the election is the Speaker today. So that's Trump's hold on the on the party leaders and the base. Now, as far as Biden is concerned, again, it was a decision. He did defeat Trump, and he has had, with some exceptions like Afghanistan, a very successful first term, and he's seen in historical terms as being a very strong president on the order of Lyndon Johnson as far as the domestic policy is concerned, and that is effective. I think, I'm sure that President Biden really enjoys the job, number one, and number two, that he believes he beat Trump again. Trump is the greatest threat to American democracy, and therefore he wants to see that through. He did it before, he's going to do it again. Now, as far as what this means with the world, your question is exactly on target, because Biden says, and others like Richard Haas, head of the Council on Foreign Relations in New York, he says the biggest doubt about the world is, the biggest doubt among Western leaders in the world is America still going to be America after the next election? And that is undercutting the effectiveness of the United States as a world leader, even though Biden is doing a heroic job and in doing the right thing. In other words, the verdict is out, just because we're sitting here today and we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I wish, I would be happy for my book to be pulped tomorrow because he's no longer going to be a presidential candidate. That's a small sacrifice to make, but I'd do it.
Just introduce yourself to Bruce and then off you go.
My name's Karen Wayne.
Thank you.
Thanks for the talk. Look, it's a bit of a kind of follows on from Brian's question, but how do you explain that, even though I understand that Trump has got many, many faults and is unsuitable for the presidency, how do you explain the fact that the Abraham Accords occurred during his time and that there were no wars?
Well, even a broken
The
clock.
question that's been
yes.
asked by Karen is, while he seems unfit in so many ways, even repulsive to us in some respects, there are always the Abraham Accords that are raised, and isn't Trump good for the Jews, Bruce?
Once in a while he lurches into the truth, you know, and once in a while he lurches into the truth, but a lot of people have seen. He did the Abraham Accords are an unvarnished triumph, and terrific that it was done. I mean, they're being tested now with the war in Gaza, but still, there's hope that at some point, if the Saudi relationship that dialogue can continue, and Biden has been true to it. On other things that have been proven popular, trade war, Joe Biden has not repealed the trade war against China, so he sees that policy as having virtue as well for American jobs and American businesses and American investment. But on other items, there's a lot of suffering. But he did do some things that deserve respect, and they certainly got it with the Abraham Accords. As far as the Jewish vote hasn't moved. It's at least 70% Democratic, and it's because it's not just are you for Israel? It's also social justice issues and culture issues and democracy issues, frankly. I mean, Jews were in the forefront of the civil rights movement, and the civil rights movement is under immense pressure. That's a nice word, from Trump. So yes, the Jews are not going to vote. That will not change, no matter who is the Republican candidate.
Thank you very much, Bruce. I'd like to give Ian the opportunity to share his thoughts. Please bring that closer.
Ian Samuel. One of the things that surprises me is the way that despite all of the blustering lies, nonsense that Trump goes on with, even lately his Nazification of everything, that he's still got such a large following amongst the American population. What is it that we in Australia can see that the American citizens can't see about Trump?
Great question. Thank you.
That's a really, really good question. I think the heart of it goes to who votes in both countries, and here in Australia, everybody votes. In America, it's voluntary voting, and if you're really amped up about your candidate or your cause, you vote. Trump's people are really amped up about what he does. I mean, racism and bigotry has been part of America since its founding. There was a civil war fought over it, and the civil rights battle continues. But Trump has, in recent days, revived rhetoric which comes straight out of Adolf Hitler. He says, "I will get rid of the communist vermin." Hitler said, "I will get rid of the vermin. I will take care of the threat from within." Now, Hitler said, "I will take care of the threat from within." And then immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. And that is exactly the language that Hitler used as far as Jews seen as immigrants in Germany. So the man knows how to push buttons, and people respond when buttons are pushed. Why I say that the guardrails in Australia are so strong, the core one is compulsory voting, and it means that the country will always land center left or center right. But in America, it means an extremist can hijack an election. And because the amped up voters on gun rights or anti-abortion can win in various races. The other guardrail, which is really crucial, is the Westminster system. Trump is a blow-in. You can't have a blow-in become prime minister in Australia. The prime minister is the person who leads the majority party in the House of Representatives. That means you're a member of the House of Representatives. That means you're part of the culture and you have the norms and you understand how it works. And so that means that Pauline Hanson will never be prime minister. It means that Clive Palmer will never be prime minister. It means that Twiggy Forrest will never be prime minister. And so that is extremely healthy as well. We also have a system where justices to the High Court are not summoned before the Senate to testify where they stand on abortion rights or gun rights. There's a process run by the Attorney General, whatever the party is, to consult with experts, and it's a seamless appointment of an expert jurist to the High Court. Well, there are several other things, but those are the key components that make Australia's democracy work, which means that extremism does not win. And again, you had voting rights. Well, I'm sorry, the Australia Electoral Commission is absolutely crucial for several reasons. One, electorates are drawn by expert hands, not gerrymandered hands. There's a national system for voting here. The person who registers in the farthest northern reaches of the Northern Territory has the same voter registration process as the wealthiest person in Toorak when they go to get on the poll. The votes are counted the same way, uniformly. You're not vulnerable to a ticket if you are giving water to someone standing in line at a poll. In fact, you get a democracy sausage at the end of the day, and that's really great. I like those. Sometimes I have two. So the Australia Electoral Commission is absolutely crucial to these outcomes as well, which is why, as I was writing the book, I knew the book would have a happy ending. Trump can do whatever he does in America. It's not going to destroy Australia's democracy.
That doesn't explain the standing in the polls, the relative standing in the polls, as I see it.
Okay, maybe we'll come back to that,
Okay.
because we talked a little bit about the polls earlier and how they're volatile and how early on they're rather more unpredictable. Could you introduce yourself to Bruce and then?
Sure. My name is George Klemfner, and thanks very much, Bruce. Very enlightening. Just as an aside, the older I get, the more I realise that Australia is not just a little America.
Right.
From what you said. But my question is very clear. How much of Trump's popularity do you think is due to the Murdoch media?
I think it goes, there's no question that Murdoch helped make Trump. But he had a resonance with Roger Ailes, who was running Fox News at the time. Ailes goes back to Richard Nixon. One of the most skillful, again, whether you agree with him or not, one of the most skillful television practitioners in American history. And he felt that, I have a review of Michael Wolff's book on Fox News that's coming out very shortly. And Ailes saw Trump, and he says, I've never seen anyone who has such touch with television as Donald Trump. And if you think of his career, aside from real estate, it was getting notoriety. And he knew how to do it, but he was also really, really good at it. I mean, I didn't understand how someone like Trump could become president, notwithstanding everything we've discussed, but anyone who's on NBC for 14 years, once a week, has that one hell of a following. And they admire him as a successful businessman and so forth. They believe in him and believe that he can deliver. So, but I think here, as I said before, I don't think Fox has as much impact as it does over there. But there's no one to replace. Yes, last year when the Fox executives, so Rupert and below him, reached a judgment that Trump was toxic, should not be rewarded with a second term, and they landed on Ron DeSantis. And they gave him, they effectively banned Trump from being interviewed on Fox through all of 2022. Yeah, all of 2022. And then, and that view was vindicated, and they landed on Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, as being the best person to take Trump's place. They gave DeSantis over 100 interviews. Trump had 2, 3, 4, 5. But DeSantis tanked. So it comes down to the quality of the candidate. You can't just conjure up somebody and give them the studio and they're going to make it.
As you know. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Robin Sher. 2 comments. One, I think it's so ironic that Trump's social media is called Truth Social.
Well, he believes in both.
Yeah. But my main point is that around the world, most elections run 10 or 15% either way between the major parties. So if you have a 7.5% swing either way, that guy wins. Trump couldn't get 50%, it never has. He said he's lost 3 times in a row on other major elections. The question is, to me always, it's this swinging vote. It's not the rusted-ons on either side that determine it. It's the swinging vote, and that's what they're all focused on because that's where it lies.
That's correct.
Smaller than ever.
And the swing vote in America is not unlike here. It's not unlike the teal voters here, where really hardline positions among the leadership of the Liberal Party opened up opportunities for others to come in. So here in Brighton, for example, you have Zoe Daniel representing Brighton. And so Trump, so far hard right. Yes, it's the independent voters. It's 40, 40, and 20. And it's the independent voters who really voted Democratic in order to stop. They can switch back. If the Republicans went with Nikki Haley, I think she would win the election. I don't have any doubt about that.
How do you actually envisage that he will get to over 50% or winning?
He will.
Do you think he will get there?
No, he will never get over 50%. But the election doesn't depend on the popular vote. We have this thing called the Electoral College. If you target the states, he did it in 2016 when he won Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. And Michigan is really relevant here
Wisconsin.
because Michigan has a very strong Palestinian Muslim communities around Detroit. They are not happy with what they're seeing in Gaza. They vote Democratic. Now, they know that Trump is also anti-Muslim. So the question is, I don't think, excuse me, I don't think they'll vote for Trump, but I don't think they'll vote. And so Biden needs every vote that he can get. And I think young people, because of his age, also may not vote. So those depressing effects of Biden could really alter the election.
Thank you. One last question from our audience, if you'll hold that close to your mic, to your mouth, please.
Ruja Varon, thank you so much for your talk. It's the first time I've understood that Trump delivers.
Could you put that closer?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Ruja Varon, thank you very much for your talk. It's the first time I've actually understood this Trump dilemma. Because
sorry,
I had not really quite fathomed that he is just such an appalling man, tells lies, and yet he delivers, and that's what everybody in the end wants. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Not everyone wants it.
Well, good point, Rabbi. I've got a couple of questions. One is, if he were to get in, given those sort of Nazi similarities, how do you envisage America would look if he were in power for 4 years? And secondly, given that he has that bent, how do you see the relationship with Israel? because it seems rather fraught in a way. At one level, you're going the Nazi direction. On the other hand, how do you support Israel? I'm puzzled about that. I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts about that.
I think, sorry, I don't know what's happening with my throat here. I think American democracy will not look like what it looks like today. There's already hyper-partisanship throughout everything. I mean, the fundamental issue is we have a Westminster culture here. So if you're the government, the opposition opposes you, wants to kill you. If you're the government, you want to kill them. It's fine. If you have a majority in the House, you get stuff through, you work it in the Senate. That culture of I win, you lose is now imposed on a constitutional system which is premised on people compromising and having a balance of power. And that's why Washington doesn't work. It's already undemocratic in several respects. The Senate, you don't need a majority to pass something in the Senate. It has rules which says you need 60 votes to pass things in the Senate. And that's why even though 60% or more of Americans want controls on guns and want abortion rights, it'll never pass the Senate. Voting rights will never pass the Senate. It used to be said of the Supreme Court that the Supreme Court followed the election returns. That doesn't happen anymore. He stacked the court. The court can ignore the election returns. That's why the retreat on abortion rights was so profound, because that's a reversal of the arc of history as to how America has evolved. So America's kind of going backwards. And I think that really, really hurts. What Trump will do, the effect of what Trump will do in terms of who he appoints, his cabinet will be all loyalists, the bureaucracy, his determination. I mean, the man doesn't dog whistle. He gets out there with a microphone and says what he's going to do. And the Times has reported that on immigration, there are plans to round up virtually everyone who's waiting to get into the country and put them in camps in Texas and deport them. And I'm sure it violates several laws, and there will be court rulings against it, but it won't stop him from doing it. So then the question is, if all this comes to pass and he acts in those ways, if he ignores laws passed by Congress, if he ignores opinions of the Supreme Court he doesn't like, if he takes supply, the appropriations bills, and says, I don't want the money spent here, I want it spent on this, the wall, whatever other, and then he does it, if he directs the regulatory agencies to go after his competitors and enemies, and go after the IRS, audit this guy, if he directs the Justice Department to indict people he doesn't like, if he closes media outlets, if he puts journalists in jail because they're not loyal, well, then America's not America anymore. And then I conclude that I said I had a happy ending. There's a false happy ending. It's a happy ending as far as Australia is concerned, but not necessarily for America. And so if that's what America becomes under Trump, that poses, I think, an existential question for Australia. Our two countries are aligned because we believe in the same things. We believe in democracy, in liberty, in a free press, in the rule of law, in a web of international relationships. If he destroys those, what are we aligned with? Why should we be aligned with the United States that's no longer the United States? And that is a big question. So I wanted to write the book in part to have people think about that question, because I think it's a very important question.
I think it's maybe the most important question, and not only that, the most appropriate question with which to conclude our conversation
she has one
today.
more thing to say. Oh, Israel. Trump is very proud of the Abraham Accords and what he did to champion things, Israel and Jerusalem and the Golan Heights and the apartment buildings that'll be built on the Golan Heights and all that stuff. And that's really good. But he feels that American Jewish voters are ungrateful and they should be voting in massive numbers for him, and they're not going to. And so that is one thing playing in his head. And the other thing playing in his head is he believes that Netanyahu has not been completely loyal to him. And so if Netanyahu is still in power when Trump comes to power, that could be a problem. Right.
Okay.
I don't think he'll like the Australian Prime Minister either, but that's for another day.
Okay. I think that we're going to finish up now. I'm going to ask my friend Zach to say goodbye to those on the live stream. Thank you very much for joining us. And Bruce, it's been a great pleasure to see you again, to spend this time together.
It's been wonderful. You're just wonderful to make the outreach and make this possible today.
No, it's wonderful that you could be here. Let's put your hands together. So, thanks everyone for coming out on the Thursday. There is coffee and tea, of course. What could you can't have a Jewish event with a little coffee and tea as well afterwards in the Friedlander.
Well,
Please
at least
come
it's
there
not matzah and more, So.
What's that?
It's not matzah and more.
No, not at all. So thank you again very much, and let's all wish for our country, for America, and for Israel only the best. Amen. Okay, thank you.
So much. It was a lot of fun.
Have you turned off your mic?
Turned it off.
Ah. Thank you.
I've got one question I should have asked in that evening. What's the impact of all the Trump's legal tourists in situations? All the court cases and indictments?
We haven't seen this movie before. We haven't seen this movie yet. There's a legal calendar and a political calendar. The political calendar is front loaded. So we'll know the nomination by whether he can win the nomination by like April. The first verdict in the case is not coming until May or June. Then we're in new territory.
All this pressure of the legals gives him a heart attack. That's what you can hope for.
Waiting for something to happen.
Because he's so unhealthy.